Georgia's got a rematch with the Texas Longhorns in Atlanta, and the most interesting thing to me about this is that Texas is favored. And we saw what happened. We saw what happened in Austin. I think that Georgia was clearly the better football team. Obviously, that day, it's easy to say Georgia was the better team. That day, went on the road and beat Texas by 15 points. And there's some caveats to that, but heading into this college football weekend, Georgia, there were lines out there on FanDuel, and I use FanDuel for the most part. I use the other sites as well to determine these things, but when you looked on FanDuel just a few days ago, before Georgia played Georgia Tech and before Texas and Texas A&M played to decide who was going to play Georgia, there were lines. It had Georgia as a 9.5 point favorite over Texas A&M and Georgia as a 1.5 favorite over Texas. Those 24 hours happen. Georgia ends up going into an 8 overtime game with Georgia Tech. Texas goes on the road and beats Texas A&M 17-7. Now Texas is a 2.5 point favorite over Georgia. So we're talking about a 4-point swing in the line after Georgia struggled, came back from behind and beat Georgia Tech, and then Texas obviously goes into College Station and handles business. Obviously, I was at the Georgia game, saw that. Obviously, I watched Texas A&M, right? That was a huge game for Georgia people. If you're watching that to determine who it's going to be, I get it. I get the line moving, right? And I understand Georgia was at home and struggled with an opponent it shouldn't have struggled with that much. But I don't understand this big swing in the line. And then if you go and you look at ESPN's matchup predictor, right? It's just another way to look at it. They're giving Texas a 61.5% chance to win, Georgia a 38.5% chance to win this game. So I guess my question that I should have asked you at the beginning of this video is, why are we down the Georgia Bulldogs again? All right, I understand this part of it, and I think that not potentially, this is straight up what's going on. It seems to me that now the narrative this week is going to be Texas is going to get its revenge now. Texas, it's hard to beat a team twice. True, potentially true. So to me, that's probably the main reasoning behind this. Why else? Well, Georgia struggled in a lot of games this year. It danced around with Tech. Early on, it danced around with Kentucky. I don't think Texas is without its struggles, though. By far, its best win of the season. I guess you could argue the Michigan win early on. To me, that win is not as strong as the A&M win. I don't know that either of them are as strong as people think. All right, and so that's my point here. With Georgia, obviously went through a tougher schedule, ends up 10-2, has the head-to-head over Texas. To me, I think these teams are going to be ranked in the college. They are in the AP poll. I think the AP top 5 will probably be the same as the college football top 5, which has Texas as 2, Georgia as number 5. I don't know how much that matters, but I don't understand this huge swing in the line after watching that weekend of football. I saw. I'll tell you in a second. Ryan Code from Dawg Post. The link is for the Dawg Post newsletter is down below in the description of this video. We're going to be hammering out content. It's the postseason now. Georgia just went through a gauntlet of a regular season, and now we're moving on to the postseason. The coverage doesn't stop. The coverage will only get better. The newsletter is the best way. It's free. Check it out. Just check out the link below. Trust me. With Texas, man, what I watched on Saturday night was the better team was clearly Texas. All right, there's no question about that. Very, very, very good defensive performance by the Longhorns, right? They go into A&M. They don't allow the Aggies to score, right? I think that the touchdown was a pick six, so they completely shut out Texas A&M's offense. Their red zone defense was very good. A&M could not convert down there. I don't necessarily agree with all the decisions that Mike Elko made in the red zone, right? You know, they had an opportunity to take points at least once, and they chose not to do that. They wanted to score. But Texas's offense was not great. Now, Texas A&M has a pretty good defense, definitely a good defensive line. It's in College Station. It's at night. It's the first time these two teams had played since before Texas A&M moved on to the SEC. It was a huge environment, but I didn't think that Texas went in there and kind of like the way that Georgia beat Texas, right? So I'll play devil's advocate all the time. Texas didn't play super well on offense. Had a couple nice drives. It had another nice drive, and Texas, I think Quinn Ewers threw a pick six, and it just wasn't great on offense for the Longhorns. Very good on defense. It was extremely similar to me to Georgia, the way that they beat Texas in a way. Now, what was different about Georgia's win at Texas? They shut down that first half. They shut down Texas's offense, and it didn't matter which quarterback was out there. They brought in Arch Manning to try to save the day a little bit, to calm Ewers down. That didn't really change what was going on in the football game. And Georgia converted off of short fields when it needed to. That was kind of the difference. Texas didn't always convert in this game. It didn't do as well on offense as Georgia did, I guess. So I guess we should start looking back at that game. What happened between Georgia and Texas? Kirby out-schemed Sarkisian, right? And to put it in lame terms, obviously the coordinators have a lot to do with that. Schumann and Travaris Robinson, Texas and their coordinators. But the overarching theme of that is, yes, Georgia outplayed Texas. Georgia out-schemed Texas. Knew where he wanted to go. We knew where he was going to escape, when he was going to escape. We knew what he was going to do. Georgia was more prepared for that football game. And Georgia was a little bit more prepared for that environment, that big-time environment. Now, Texas has gone on the road multiple times this year, and they've done it, right? They beat the crap out of Michigan. I think that Michigan at that point was not the Michigan that we're seeing at the end of the year. In fact, that was when Texas was really playing its best, and Michigan was playing its worst when those two teams met up. So it's hard for me to take too much away from games early in the season. They do matter, though, like Clemson and Georgia. We're far away. Would Georgia beat Clemson the way that they beat them at the beginning of the season? Probably not. Right? I think that they would beat them by a lot, but not probably in the exact same way where they just absolutely strangled them. With this Texas team, now it has to go to Atlanta. Now it has to go play in this environment that Georgia's been in the last 3 seasons, that Georgia's been in a lot under Kirby Smart, that Carson Beck and this offense and Georgia's whole team, a lot of these guys have been in these last couple SEC championships, have been impact players in it. It is going to be an environment that, even if Texas comes out and is winning, it doesn't mean that Georgia wasn't prepared for that environment. They are much more used to this, and it is Georgia's second stadium, basically. They play in this all the time. They played in it this year. I don't understand where this is coming from. Texas, to me, one of its best wins is when they blew out Florida. Obviously, they go on the road and they beat A&M. I've been saying all year, I thought A&M was going to put up a little bit more of a fight. I took A&M +6, obviously, on the Dawg Post Pick'em. That's what you saw. But to me, I just don't understand a 4-point swing after what we watched. What we saw again was Georgia mount an incredible comeback and win with resiliency. And there are ways to look at it and look at the negatives with Georgia's performance. And I think you have to acknowledge, man, they're getting ran all over. Ooh, Quintravion Wiesner for Texas really ran well on A&M. Maybe that'll translate. Part of why Georgia struggled so much against Georgia Tech is it struggles with dynamic quarterbacks. And Haynes King is one of the most dynamic quarterbacks I've seen this year. This is not a guy that's going to go on to the NFL and be a successful player. He's just not what they're looking for. But he's a guy that could make some serious plays in college. And Haynes King was a warrior on Friday night. And he terrorized Georgia's defense. 400 total yards, 5 touchdowns, 3 on the ground, 2 in the air. It was a big game for him. He made all the plays necessary. Ewers physically cannot do what Haynes King did to them. Arch Manning can, to an extent. Right? And we've seen that this year. I don't think you're extremely worried if you're Georgia's defense and you're scheming up for Quinn Ewers, a guy who to me has struggled in a lot of spots this season. Super, super talented player, super talented arm. But in a lot of moments outside of this Michigan game this year, to me, he has struggled. And he struggled mightily against the Dogs when they had the environment backing them. What will happen when the environment is probably back in Georgia a little bit more, for being honest? I don't know what the split is going to be at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. My guess is 55-45 Georgia fans, roughly, percentage-wise. I think there will be a little bit more Georgia fans, but don't underestimate the Texas money. They were going to come out to Atlanta, enjoy the show. Obviously, it's an easy drive for us. We're going right over there for them. That's a flight. And will they have as many fans? Will this environment be too big for them? It hasn't been on the road. It was at home, and it's kind of confusing to me why this. I just, to me, this game's almost like a pick'em line. I don't understand. I don't get it.